And hosted by Hyland. Stop your cramp, not your race by Polar. Check out the Polar Vantage M and Marathon Edition. And UCAN, perform, workout, energize. 2015 Boston Marathon champion Caroline Rotich joins us, along with Coach Ryan Bolton, who's not only a coach, but was on our first ever Olympic Triathlon team back in 2000. How you both doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so Caroline, I bet last year, even though you guys train in Albuquerque and you get a little weather, you probably didn't like that rain and cold. Rain is one thing, but rain and cold together, that's probably not very good.
Yeah, that didn't go pretty well. It was like prepared for anything, but when it's come to the rain and cold and wind, that was tough.
Well, I was in my Elvis outfit running at about mile 15 when I realized I couldn't feel my hands. And I couldn't even I couldn't open a gel pack. And I'm like, okay, I'm in trouble. Hypothermia is not a good thing.
It's not.
Yeah, she crossed the finish line, and she was basically in a catatonic state. She was in a wheelchair, and her eyes were wide open, and she didn't recognize me. She didn't know where she was, and we brought her into the med tent, and her core temp was 87 degrees. And,
my
she
God.
was out of it, yeah.
But you finished.
I did.
She doesn't remember the last 2 kilometers, but she finished.
Well, that's sort of the hard part with a race that's point to point, because you either finish or become a resident. You know, where do you drop out?
There were a couple of the Kenyan guys who actually stopped on the course, and people brought them into their apartment, and they just went into the apartment and hung out. No one knew where they were. They were just hanging out watching TV.
You know what? When it's your day and not your day. How far into the race? Do you remember much of the race?
I do remember until like close to halfway, I was starting to feel like my eyes was not like wide open, and I tried like I can't see, and then I was like maybe it's just like keep going, and then my hand started to be like heavy. I took off the gloves because it was already wet, and I was like it's getting more heavy and heavy, and then by mile from there I was just like keep moving. By mile kilometer 40 I was like I didn't even know where I was.
So when you win this race in 2015, how did that change? Did it change your life? Did all of a sudden more people know who you were and more sponsors?
Yeah, it's really changed my life. It's changed even like how I think about running and everything, because you train every day and you don't know when it's going to be that day.
Right.
And then that one was kind of like the moment that I know I knew that everything I have been doing all these years and getting everything together is coming down to be like starting to change from there. So it was kind of like a moment that like moved to the different stage.
Ryan, did you feel that year, 2015, was going to be Caro's year?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew she was really fit, and I knew she was ready to go. This is such a big race with so many great runners in it, and everything. It's kind of like the Hawaii Ironman, honestly. Like,
right,
you can be everything has to go right on that day, and you have to have a great day. And she was. I knew she was ready. I felt that she had been ready before, honestly, to win this race or a similar race. But that day, it kind of all aligned. Yeah.
Well, it sort of goes along with a couple years ago. You started working with Ben Hoffman, right, the triathlete. And I remember we chatted, and you mentioned that Ben was ready for a good one in Kona.
Yeah.
And he hadn't had it, right? He didn't have it. But then just last week, he runs 2:39 and wins South Africa for the third time. But the 2:39 was something you've probably been expecting for a while.
That is, and I know Ben had been expecting it for a while as well. And, last year he went into South Africa after a crash during the Cape Epic mountain bike race, and it compromised his race. The entire year was set off a little bit by that. And then, but this winter, like, he just had really great prep. We've actually Caro's been training with him a bit in Tucson, Arizona.
Have you been hurting him, Caro? Have you been punishing that poor little guy?
No, I have been like learning more too from him, because like seeing him going from something else to something else, and I will be like, okay, I'm gonna just go for a run and then come back and nap.
Yeah, she's always like, I can't believe, Yeah. And sometimes I'll make those guys run off the bike with her when they're running fast.
Oh,
so they extra suffer. Yeah.
Oh
and
my
I'm
God,
like, yeah.
that sounds like that's really not nice. So wait, they're coming off the bike after doing a hard bike session. And then Caro's like stretching and waiting and doing some
getting
intervals.
bored, looking at her watch. When are these guys going to finally get off this bike?
Can't you guys run 5:20 pace? What's going on? So, and talk about classic races. When you win in 2015, I think you won by, 4 seconds?
Yes.
Take me through that last. You've been racing for 25 miles. And now the race is coming down to really 3 of you, and then Mare Dibaba, you two right at the end with the 4 seconds. When did you get away, and did you feel that you were ready to win that race?
As soon as when we went down to 3, I was like, oh, I have chance to be top 3. And
right.
Yeah, as far as we can go, and I was feeling good at that point, because it's always when you in front group with the people, you still feeling good than when you just
right.
like behind there. So I knew I was still feeling good. And then we went down to 2, and I was like, oh, this is even better. I'm gonna be 2 if it goes
There's
worse.
good money.
Yeah.
Either way, there's good money.
I'm gonna be second if something goes wrong. And then we got to the Boylston Strait, and I was like, oh, it's home. I can get this. So I sprinted really hard, and I was like, oh shoot, it's far away. So
that's a long stretch.
Yeah, it's long stretch. So I was like, oh no, maybe I'm not gonna make it all the way to the finish line. So I went back a little bit and let her lead a bit. And I was all of a sudden I was like, oh, here is the finish line. So that's when I was
that's
like,
when you made your move.
I got this. Yeah.
And Ryan, where were you were you at the finish?
Yeah, I was standing at the finish, but we it took us a long time to get from our hotel, which is a block away from the finish, to the finish because of the security.
Right.
So I probably missed 3 kilometers of the race, so I had no idea what was going on. So when we came into the finish line, like all I could do is look up at the screen, and I could look straight down Boylston Street, of course, but all I could see was her, and you couldn't tell, the perspective, depth perception.
Right.
And,
it looks like someone's right.
So
on
I had to
their
look
heels.
up at the screen, and honestly, we didn't really know what happened until she crossed the line. Like, her agent actually was standing next to me, and he said, "What happened?" Said, "She won."
What happens now? Yeah,
exactly.
Then it becomes like a media frenzy, right? When you win it, you got the wreath on your head, and what was the reception? When you went back and saw family, and were people pretty excited for you?
They was, because Boston is one of the big races, so everyone knows that race, and everyone was kind of pretty much knows.
So you just had a half marathon in Austin, 1:13, was in February. You guys ran a 1:13 there. That puts you in a position where you feel like, okay, I think I'm ready to have a great one here.
Was a very good place to start, because end of last year I got a stress fracture, and I was out of training for a while and out of racing, so I didn't know where I was, and doing that race was kind of one of the point that I was like, okay, no injury, I'm healthy, so this is good place to start this year.
So Ryan, as somebody who comes from the cross training bent, how much cross training do you do with your runners?
A bit. It depends on the person.
Right.
So if you saw Caro in a swim pool,
on the road bike 4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah, we go on, a myriad of things ultimately.
Really?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. The only thing that, from a triathlete standpoint, is swimming. She definitely
You stay out of the water.
She sinks.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. She weighs about 100 pounds in person, and in the water she weighs 200 pounds. I can tell you. I've tried to get her to float on her back, and I can't hold her up.
I tried a couple of times, and he told me that, so I'm kind of I'm going to learn how to swim one day, but not yet.
Not yet. No, yeah. You don't need to learn how to swim yet. Last year you probably felt like you were swimming at this race.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy being rain on, and you can't even tell or see where you're going. So
we actually joke.
Yeah,
we actually joke she should have worn a wetsuit for the first, maybe 21K.
Yeah.
And then taken that off and then ran to the finish, and it would have been okay.
So when you do all that preparation, Ryan, you got somebody ready, and obviously you prepare for weather. You're in Albuquerque; it gets cold. But when you deal with conditions that are that ridiculous, what's your message to the athletes?
Yeah, it's really hard, because watching it and being here during part of it, you probably felt the same thing. You were running. It's just a really big disappointment, because you feel like you can't race the race.
Exactly.
It's attrition,
survival.
It's survival, exactly. And at a major marathon, that's not the way you want to see things go, and especially when you're really fit and you're really ready. It's just very disappointing, Yeah.
So talk a little bit about last year. When Ben and Sebastian Kienle decided they're going to do Cape Epic early in the season, right? And we both know that Cape Epic is brutal.
Yeah.
And there's not one pro mountain biker in the world that wanted to be behind Sebastian Kienle and Ben Hoffman, having these sort of poser triathletes come into their world. So they were marked men. Those guys were. Everybody was going to go get them. Yeah. Do you think maybe those guys might have underestimated how brutal that thing was going to be?
You know, those guys are probably two of the toughest guys in the sport.
Yeah, no question.
And they're good buddies as well. So I think choosing them to do that for the Ironman Foundation was a great team. And I think in some ways they did underestimate like how hard it was going to be, but I also think that they opened a lot of eyes and how well they actually did.
They did very
well.
And
I noticed, I know that Ben, for example, kind of crashed early on in the race, was dealing with that the whole time. Both of them had a stomach bug the entire race, which is incredibly hard to deal with. And but they still did really well. They still beat some good pro teams, and they had a couple names that they wanted to pick off, and they beat those guys too, which is really good.
When you look at where Ben's at now, all right, it seems like he's in a good groove. He's back healthy. He's gonna be a parent. Everything is sort of shaping up for him. And I mean, I was seriously concerned about his career last year after that crash, because you hurt your back, and you know that's something that's sometimes very difficult to come back with. Did you have concerns?
You know, Bennett, he's incredibly disciplined, and he's also he's got an incredibly strong mind. And I knew that he would come back. I knew it was going to take some work. He really, over this winter, he worked incredibly hard with both physical therapy, strengthening weak areas, the areas that were basically weak that caused issues. And, and then also we ramped his training up a little slower than normal, and it ended up paying off. I don't know if I ever really doubted it. Like, I was more concerned with him, like, mentally getting back in the game. But him and Caro are actually similar that way. And, like, when they flip a switch, they flip that switch. And I saw that switch flip with him to, like, on mode. And I knew he was in a really good place. And, the fact that he's going to be a dad is, I know, super exciting to him. And I also always think that's good for an athlete, and especially Ben, because it gives him even more purpose to what he's doing. And I know he's so excited about that.
So now he won South Africa, so he doesn't have to worry about doing another Ironman, which is always a nightmare. He just has to focus on Kona.
Yeah.
Now, are you a believer that it's good to do another Ironman, or is it better for someone like Ben at this point, since he doesn't have to, just to focus on speed?
Right. It's really athlete dependent, and he's highly, highly, highly motivated now because he did have such a great race and he ran so well. And so we're kind of planning out the rest of the season, and is another Ironman on the docket?
Good.
Maybe, possibly, but right now it's not a plan. So, he'll do some 70.3 racing, of course, and then he'll take a little bit of a break and kind of rest and recover, and then get into the big Kona cycle.
That's very cool. So, what have you learned when you're training with these guys like a Ben, who are doing 3 different sports? Did you gain anything from training with someone like Ben?
I do, for sure, because every time I will be like, oh yeah, I did 20 miles. I'm so tired, and I see them just like going from like 8 to 9 hours of bike, and then they swim before doing that, or like doing something else, and then counting the time that even they do take naps they don't have. So I always I can't complain. I just have like 20 miles, 2 hours and something. And then I rest all the day, and then I can just keep going. So that's seeing that they can go and go and go, and it's making me know that there is no limit. I can keep pushing myself hard as I can.
Ryan, you're probably one of the few guys who has a camp that has triathletes and runners, right? Because most people are very specific. And I'm guessing there's a purpose for that. You feel they learn from each other.
Yeah, they do. More than, they're world-class athletes, which is probably the number one thing. So even though they do different sports and they're similar endurance sports, they all have the same mentality. Yeah. And I love to feel that and see that vibe off of each other. They really, it makes them each stronger and stronger and stronger. And Caro learns from Ben. Ben learns from Caro. The whole group, they're all learning from each other all the time and kind of feeding on each other, and it crescendos. And so me, in fact, we are in Tucson basically the last few weeks, and just being with Ben and being with Caro and being with the other athletes that we have there, you could just feel, one morning I woke up and I was I felt good, and I was like, "What? You know, I feel like I'm really in the vibe right now." And I was like, "Why is that?" And I was like, "It's because I'm here with all the athletes, and they're all in this like heightened zone. You know, they're all in the zone right now, and that's kind of a rare thing to happen at, you know, all at once when they're all together." And I mean, that's a coach's dream as well.
Well, and what's fascinating too is if you look back, U.S. running really got good again after a long dry spell when the Mammoth Track Club and the Hansen Group and what you're doing with Harambee and down in Arizona. But triathlon, you know, really, some people train together, like Waddy's guys get together, but they don't have, I don't think, as much of organized group training like that, where the top elites get together.
Yeah, that's true. You know, in ITU style racing, there are those. There are a lot more groups, you know,
right.
that have
Smith,
like daily training environment type situations. But yeah, in Ironman, it is a little bit independent. But you do notice, and I mean, I know this with the athletes that I work with, is they do train, they have their kind of, you know, training partners, training buddies that they really feed off and that they really get along with. And I think that's highly beneficial. But I think in Ironman it is, you know, it's a little more Lone Ranger-y for sure. And it's a little more independent.
As somebody who was a professional triathlete for a long time, what did you gain from that to move to the world of running and create the Harambee Group?
Well, you know, I grew up a runner, and that's what I did in college and everything. And so, I mean, in triathlon, you know what triathlon teaches you a lot about is recovery.
It really
because
does.
There's such a delicate balance with that and everything.
That's a really good point.
And so in the running world, I mean, it's definitely transferred into that and understanding, you know, those key concepts. And it's interesting working with the East Africans because I would say one thing that they are incredibly good at is recovering, and just naturally so, like innately so. It's just in their system. Caro's incredibly good at resting. And, you know, and I'm talking with age group triathletes and everything, and you know, or even age group runners, they want to know why is she so good? How does she do so well? And I mean, same's true for the pro triathletes that I work with. I'm saying they train really, really, really hard, but they also rest really, really, really well. And so I mean, you learn that living in the triathlon world because it's a delicate balance. I mean, you're always walking that razor's edge.
I remember when Josh Cox went over and was training in Kenya, and he said the one thing he learned was he used to consider rest. I finish my run, and then I'm going to pick up my laundry and go and do my errands and get on the computer. He goes, the Kenyan guys would finish running, and they would lay on a rock and watch the clouds go by. That was rest.
That's
they
exactly
didn't move,
right. Yeah.
Right? They'd lay there and watch the clouds go by, because unless you're really resting, really, that you're not recovering, because your mind's working. You're doing too much going on.
Yeah. Cara, she's a world-class sleeper.
Are you?
Honestly, yeah.
How many hours you sleep a night?
A night I will go from 8 or 9 to 6 in the morning when I have like to go early, but I do take long naps during daytime.
Long naps?
Yeah, in the middle of the day. Even today, I mean, the Boston Marathon's tomorrow. Right. I know this afternoon from like 1 to 5, she'll be seriously in bed, and she'll probably like be sleeping the majority of that time.
Well, I used to remember Mark Allen, who was a 6-time Ironman world champion. I think 12 hours a day he was comatose. Right? Between naps and sleeping 10 hours, he was basically, we look at it, it's recovery, but you're like, wow, how do you do that? But that's essential. You need that.
You train yourself to do that, and you get used to that, and you just like get in the cycle that you sleep more, you keep sleeping more, so it's easy.
Now, is Caro doing some bench pressing and you get in the weight room and do all that type of stuff too? Or is he kicking and screaming?
I do other easy stuff, not like Ben ones. Ben does a lot.
Yeah, so do you work out in the weights with Ben?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, nice. She does. She does strength training, you know, until, you know, a few weeks out from the race, but she does strength training. And yeah, she's got a pretty mean leg press right now, right?
Sweet.
She's got multiple plates on there.
So when Ben's there, you make sure you go over and put more plates on when you go to push it?
I try not to do that because I know what's coming next.
Because you know you'll just upset him.
Yeah.
So Cara, what would it mean to you to win this for the second time?
Winning the first time, you're kind of like so excited and just like, you know, out of this world. But going for the second time will be like out of this world. It's kind of like going to be the best thing in my career, in my running, and even my life. Yeah,
I
so
love it. Well, I'd love to see it.
thanks.
And that's how, when you win it for the second time, you guys can't big time me. Next year, you got to come back and talk to me again. You're like, oh, sorry,
We'll talk to you
World.
tomorrow, even
We got
immediately
all
after
the
the
big
race.
guys. We don't have time for Breakfast with Bob anymore. We don't have time for you small guys. You can go talk to triathlon guys, but not us. That's great. Caro, congratulations on everything you've done. Ryan, I love what you've done with Harambee Project. Congratulations on everything you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Again, this is Breakfast with Bob, Boston Marathon Edition. Hold on, everybody. We will be right back.